From the time I was 12 until I was 18, my mom lived in this 2-story apartment. I lived with and was raised by my maternal grandparents, but I also spent a great deal of time staying with my mother, so both places were equally home for me. For the entire 6 years that she lived there, my mother received sporadic phone calls from an unknown caller who we both came to call the Hello Man. The reason for this is fairly simple. Whenever he called, he would say hello several times in a monotonous voice with a short, evenly timed pause between each utterance. The only times he ever called was when no one happened to be there, so each call was always recorded on the messaging machine. Each time the call was made from a blocked number or a public place. It goes without saying as well that it was not a voice we recognized, else the person would have been eventually approached about this. The first few times we wrote it off as being a wrong number or perhaps some sort of strange prank. It wasn't exactly threatening in any way. It wasn't even really unsettling to us either. For the entire 6 years, though, we would constantly receive these calls. Sometimes weeks or even months would pass before we'd find another one of these messages on the answering machine. After a few years, once we'd become completely certain that it was not someone we knew, we still didn't find any harm in them. Irritating to come home on a bad day when you were already in a bad mood, but nothing more than that. Actually, it even became a bit of a running joke in the family, weaving into the idle comments that made up our days and small talk between one another. In all those years we'd received those calls, the messages were always the same, and no other form of contact was made between this person and us. About 2 years before she eventually moved out for unrelated reasons, my mother had her number changed, again for completely unrelated reasons. Several weeks after doing so, a new message from the Hello Man was left. The context of the call was the same. Hello? 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 But for the first time, the tone and pacing was different. There was barely a pause between each word, and he was louder, almost panicky in the way he spoke. Later that week, a second message was left. This one sounded angry, and he just said hello a single time. For the first time, we actually felt a little bit threatened by the caller now. How exactly had this person gotten her new number? You'd think this would be more of a reason for us to suspect a family friend or family member, but it only made us more sure that it was not. No one we knew would take a prank far enough to make us feel like a legitimate threat, no matter how small. The sense of fear disappeared quickly, however. It was weeks before we'd received another call, and when we did, it was back to the same old monotone and slow repetition as before. In fact, after this point, the calls came even more infrequently than before. We all but forgot about the Hello Man in the times in between. At the end of those 6 years, 3 years ago now, I was staying with my mom nearly full time to help her pack up and organize. Due to some various personal issues, she would be putting most of her belongings in storage to stay with us, my grandparents, my siblings, and I, for a short time before finding a new place for herself. On one particular night, when it was just me and my mother spending the night at her now nearly barren apartment, we received one final call from the Hello Man. An actual call while we were there, not just a message left for us to find hours or even minutes later. At the time, we'd been taking a break and watching a movie, which was just the reason we'd still kept the couch, TV, and DVD player at the apartment. Hello? Hello? I know you're there this time. Hello? There was a long pause during which we heard nothing, not even the sound of his breath. Then, just as the answering machine was about to cut off his message, he started to quote a line from the movie we had just been watching and had just been said a few minutes before. The machine beeped and cut him off, but he did not call back after. Needless to say, we called my grandfather to come pick us up because we did not want to spend the night there any longer. This story happened when I was about 17 years old. My friend at the time was 16. I'm 24 and she's 23 now for perspective. We're both female, by the way. One night we were at my parents' house, which is basically small town USA. We decided to go for a walk around my neighborhood. It wasn't too late, but it was starting to get dark. It was maybe around 9 or 9:30 p.m. There were a few houses being built in my neighborhood at the time, so we decided it would be fun to explore inside of one. Side note, I've always been a bit paranoid and just naturally cautious, but my friend was the wild, rebellious one of our group. We entered the house through the garage area because there wasn't a door and the house was basically a frame with only a few walls. I stayed near the entrance because I was getting some really bad vibes. My friend decided to go further into the home. About 2 or 3 minutes into our exploration, I heard moaning sounds coming from the half-built stairs. I asked my friend if she'd heard it too. She said no and kept on looking at stuff. It was then that I saw a very large man stand up on the stairs and begin to walk down them. I screamed and grabbed her. "Run!" We bolted out of there. I refused to look back the entire time because I was too scared to check and see if he was running after us. Once we got to my house, we ran inside and locked the doors. Nothing else happened that night. The next weekend, the same friend was over at my house again, and we were sitting outside on my trampoline at about 1 a.m. We were just talking about random shit when she just stopped suddenly mid-sentence and went as pale as a ghost. I asked her what was wrong. All she could say was, "We need to go inside now." While we got off the trampoline, she never took her eyes off that spot of the yard she was staring at. Once inside, I asked her just what the hell that was all about. She said she'd seen someone in my backyard, sitting by my mom's flower bed, only 15 feet from the trampoline. The person was on the ground, rocking back and forth while staring at us. My mom and stepdad were already asleep, so we didn't want to bother them. Instead, we made sure all of the doors and windows were locked, and that there was a weapon by the door if it came to that. After we calmed down, we went down to the basement to my room and started watching some movies. The street lamp was shining through the little window in my room, and I shit you not, I could see there was someone walking back and forth in front of my window. At this point, we were so scared, we decided to wake my stepdad up. He went outside, but he didn't find anyone. Nothing happened again for a few weeks, until one day I was home by myself and kept getting these weird phone calls on the landline. It was this guy with a really deep voice, asking how I was doing, and what I was doing, and if my mom and stepdad were home. I hung up on him every time without answering. About 20 minutes after the last call was made, I heard a loud crashing sound in my basement that scared the fuck out of me. That was about all I could take. I pushed our couch against the basement door, grabbed a butcher knife, and noped the fuck out of there to my neighbor's house. Luckily, her dad was home and called the police. When the police got there, I told them everything that had been happening, and they checked out my basement. Someone had popped out the window in my bedroom and shattered it all over my bed. There was no one in the basement, though, and nothing like that has ever happened since. So I currently attend college in a major city in the United States. It's a lovely place with lots of fun things to do. However, it does have one big downside. It's a major human trafficking hub, one of the biggest in the nation, in fact. For me, a teenage girl, this means I have to be especially careful. My parents gave me the whole safety talk before I moved out. Never go out into the city alone, especially at night. For my first 8 months on campus, nothing too concerning happened, save for a few catcallers and the particularly inappropriate behavior of one homeless man as I ran by him during a workout. However, when I returned to campus after spring break, I had one of the most anxiety-inducing experiences of my life. I had visited my parents over spring break and taken a bus back. It was a lot cheaper than airfare, and my cat didn't handle flying so well. I'd visited home a few times, and usually I had no problems getting from the bus station to my dorm when I got back to the city. I'd just call up a ride from an app and be home in about 10 minutes or so. My bus got in around 9-ish at night, so it was already very dark outside. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but for some reason, the GPS on the ride-sharing app must have messed up my location. 4 different drivers missed the turn to find me and ended up canceling the ride. After 30 minutes of waiting, now on the 5th driver, I finally called to tell her exactly where I was outside the station, so there wouldn't be any confusion. She said she was on her way, so I stood there at the curb and waited. I had headphones on but was not playing any music. This was my way of preventing people from approaching me, but also allowing me to hear and be aware of my surroundings. Boy, am I glad I did that. After about 2 minutes of standing there on the curb, a man walked directly behind me, stopped, and leaned up against a wall. At first, I was only mildly wary of the man. I could feel the vague sensation that he was watching me, but I was trying not to be too paranoid. After feeling the staring continuing though, I texted my boyfriend to let him know what was going on, just in case. The man pulled out a flip phone and made a call. I felt a bit less nervous, until I heard the details of the conversation. I'm not sure who he was talking to on this call, but the man was describing the details of my appearance into the phone. I could make out small snippets like, yeah, she's tall, maybe 5'8", 5'10". Red hair, yeah, she's young, really pretty. I tried not to show any signs that I was hearing all this. My headphones were still on, so I figured he thought I was clueless. I checked my phone to see where my ride was. She was stuck at an intersection about half a mile away. I was not sure what I could do at this point. I couldn't just start running because I had my bag and cat carrier on me. I decided to call my driver again and ask if I could stay on the line with her until she got there. I could tell she was a little bit confused, but I didn't want to go into detail right there. If this guy really was trouble, I wanted to make sure he didn't do anything sudden if he realized I'd caught on to him. However, I did not want to call the police directly because I didn't think I had enough to report him yet. I also didn't want to walk anywhere else because the surrounding area wasn't lit as well as where I was already standing. For some of you, this may not sound like the scariest experience. For me, however, being alone at night in a big city with a human trafficking problem and suddenly having a strange man stare at me and call to tell someone what I looked like, it scared me. Big time. He hung up his phone after continuing for a few minutes, but thank God my ride got there only a minute later. I'm not sure I want to know what would have happened if that driver had canceled on me too. This is technically my mother's story, although I am also in it. When I was about 4 months old in 1994, my mom and dad had been having money issues, and as a result, he would often work late. On a late Wednesday night around 9 p.m., there was a knock at the door. My mom put me down in the living room and went to see if it was my dad having forgotten his keys or something. She opened the door without looking properly. It was a man standing on the doorstep. He smiled at her and asked if he could use our phone as his car had broken down. Flustered, she said yes and walked backward a little to let him get to the telephone that lived on the hall table. However, he did not stop at the table. He kept walking up the hall towards her. She asked him what he wanted, pointed at the phone saying it was right there, and said her husband was just getting out of the shower. This is when it started to get really creepy. He stopped walking, cocked his head to one side, and said he couldn't hear the shower running. He then gave her a really big smile. He added that it was just her home right now, wasn't it? My mom said at this point all she could think about was trying to make it to me, maybe dropping me out a window, trying to get us into the bathroom that had a lock, praying to any god or gods that were listening that my dad would just pull up into the driveway. Anything. Then she heard a growl. My mom had been out getting the wash in from the outside laundry before she'd gone in to check on me in the living room and had left the back door open just a crack. Our Doberman Pride had gotten into the house and had walked out of the kitchen into the hallway between Mum and this man. She started growling, showing all her teeth. My mom told him to get out now before she set the dog upon him. Apparently he freaked out and backed out of the house before taking off down the street. Dad got home about 20 minutes later. Felt like an eternity according to Mom. The man was never caught though, and we never saw him again. I really hope I never do, even though I wouldn't even know if I saw him. Pride lived until she was 13 and was the most spoiled dog ever. I don't know what would have happened to Mom or me without her though. This story happened about 5 years ago in a fairly small town in Illinois. I was 26 years old at the time. My husband and I were looking to rent a small house. We needed a place bigger than our one bedroom. At least one that would accommodate us and 2 of his cousins. It would be staying with us for an extended vacation from another country. I went to look at a set of attached houses and was joined on my tour by another older woman. She asked me what I did for work, and I told her I worked with children with special needs. She told me she had a son with a disability, and if we both moved in, I could help him. I didn't think much more of it at the time. Flash forward a few weeks, and we're in the middle of the move-in process. The houses occurred in groups of 4, with 2 groups on the left side of the street and 2 on the right, making up a total of 16 houses. The road was basically a dead end. We moved into the second house of the quad on the right side, and the lady I toured with moved into the second on the left side, exactly across from us. On either side of our house was a family with children, grandparents raising a 13-year-old granddaughter, and a Brady Bunch-type step-family raising multiple children, with at least 2 to 3 teen/preteen girls. This matters later, I promise. Everyone around seemed friendly and family-oriented. A few weeks after we moved in, we were waiting for his cousins to arrive. I saw the lady I toured with occasionally, but never saw a small child with a disability. She did have what appeared to be an adult son living with her, mid-20s, average height, slightly bulky. He often sat on patio furniture in his garage with the door up. When I was coming home or leaving, we would wave and say hi, but that was about the extent of our interaction. A lot of the people in the neighborhood use their garages as patios, in fact. It was kind of weird, but I can't really explain it. One night at about 3 a.m., I'm in graduate school and stay up all hours of the night studying. My husband works midnights at a Toyota factory and wouldn't be home for about 4 hours. I had just laid down about 20 minutes before, but was not quite asleep yet. It was sure gonna suck at 6:30 a.m., but 4 hours a night was about the norm back then. All of a sudden, I heard this loud knock at the door. I went to answer it. There was no peephole, but about 2 feet away was an oversized set of windows that looked into the living room. They were covered in blinds, and peeking out was clearly noticed by the person at the door. I decided to skip this process and just talk through the door. I'll stop here and say that I'm inherently naive. I trust everyone, but I'm getting somewhat better about it since we've moved to a city since this occurred. On the other side of the door was the neighbor's adult son. He told me that his mother had left for work and he'd forgotten his keys. If I could just let him borrow my phone to call his mother. I went to unlock the door, justifying that I knew this man from the neighborhood and I wanted to do my best to help. At the last second though, my brain finally kicked in. I told him I'd dial the number for him and went to get my phone. When I went to return, I could see the handle jiggling. Why I didn't stop then? I don't know. Instead, I asked him for the number. I still don't know why I didn't open the door. I'm very naive, but something stopped me. He rattled off this bunch of random numbers. The area code wasn't right, and it wasn't enough to make a full telephone number anyway. I asked him to repeat it, thinking maybe I'd misheard. Instead, he said, "Oh, that's okay. My mom just pulled up anyway." Remember, his house is directly parallel to mine. I looked out the window. I could see no one had arrived. The garage door isn't up, no car is in the driveway, no lights are on. He just walked over and walked directly into the home from the front door. After taking a few deep breaths, I tried to decide if I should call 911 or if maybe I was being a bit paranoid. Maybe somehow I'd missed his mom's arrival. This wasn't possible, but I did not want to think about the alternative. At that moment, a police car pulled up with the lights on though. The couple on the left side of this man's house was a young lesbian couple who coincidentally worked with my husband. They came out to meet the police. I also got out, thinking I could at least ask him to follow up once whatever he was called for was resolved. Turns out, the man had tried to open their door and walk in. Because they also work midnights but had a day off, they also kept late hours. They were watching TV when they heard him and called the cops. I told the police my story as well and went back to bed. I figured I was overreacting because the officer didn't ask me to make a statement or otherwise record my issue. More of an "I'll check this all out, little ladies" type of thing. Well, the next day, I'm talking to the grandmother of the 13-year-old and the mother with multiple kids that live on either side of me. Apparently, he was watching their daughters playing outside and had even asked one to come over and sit on his lap in the garage. The grandmother said he'd tried to open the bedroom window of the girl, but it was locked, thankfully. I don't know if they reported this to the police, but they said he was asked to move by the landlord. His mother could stay, but he wasn't allowed to live there or visit. After that, things calmed down a bit. We did notice tool marks on the back door, which opened directly into the master bedroom. I know for a fact those marks weren't there when we moved in, as I took pictures of everything to ensure we were returned our deposit. I didn't observe them until a few weeks later, after he was already gone. I can't say for sure if he did it prior or if it was someone else later. Not like either is a very comforting choice. Many months later, near the end of our 1-year lease, I started to see the son around again. He wasn't consistently at the home like before, but appeared to visit once a week or so. One night during 2:30 a.m., there was a loud knock at the door. This time, my husband, who had switched to a daytime shift by that time, answered through the door. As soon as the person on the other side heard a male voice, they turned and immediately started to walk away. They were wearing a hoodie and dark clothes, and I couldn't see the face. The body type was similar though. The person walked at an angle away from our house, in the general direction of the back of the neighbor's home. It was unclear if he was walking toward a creek/swamp area with an open field behind, or to the back row of houses across from us. Either way, I called the landlord the next day. He confirmed the man wasn't supposed to live there, said he had mental challenges, but didn't elaborate. He said he would follow up. We never saw the guy again and luckily moved across the country a few weeks later. So, mentally challenged neighbor who I think is probably a pedophile, let's not meet again. What is up guys, Blue Spooky here as always. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you guys enjoyed the content of this video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you do decide you like my content enough to subscribe, please be sure to hit the bell button right next to the subscribe button and turn notifications to all so you can be notified of every video I post in the future. If you don't feel like doing that though, I post a video nearly every day, so you can just come back every now and then and check up on what you missed. If you guys have any criticisms on what I can do better or any feedback on the stories in the video, please be sure to leave them in the comments below, as I always enjoy reading all the comments and I try to give them hearts and respond when I can. If you guys would like to reach me for any reason, or you would like to send in a story to be read, you can go ahead and take a look in the description below the video. You'll find a link to all of my social media, including my Facebook, Gmail, and Twitter accounts. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is if it has one, what type of story it is if it has a theme, and how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. Last but not least, I also run 2 other channels, Mr. Blue Skies and Darkest Hour, where I do true crime videos and dark documentaries respectively. If that kind of content sounds interesting to you, why not go ahead and check it out and see if it is for you. Aside from that though guys, I think that's pretty much it for now, so thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.